Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our Modern Work Security Series webinar with a focus on Azure AD Premium Plan 2. My name is Shay Awojabi, and I am a Modern Work Technical Specialist here to help moderate and assist with answering your questions. Today, we will be discussing some of the features of our Azure AD Plan 2 license, and our goal is to share and better equip you with tools to better automate your processes and secure your organization's resources by leveraging risk-based conditional access controls, privileged identity management, access reviews, entitlement management, amongst other things. Our speaker today is Modern Work Solutions Specialist, our awesome Laurie Martinez, who will be leading us in the technical delivery of Azure ADP 2. We also have a forward from our digital sales representative, Jada Fisher. As we go along in the session, please feel free to post questions in the chat and we'll be happy to take those. If you'd like to learn more about taking advantage of these features in your environment, please reach out to a dedicated sales specialist, your dedicated sales specialist or partner. With that, I'll be handing it off to Jada. Jada?
Thank you so much, Shay, and good morning, everyone. We're so excited to share Microsoft security capabilities across our webinar series, today focusing on Azure Active Directory P2. As Shay mentioned, my name is Jada Fisher, and I'm a digital sales representative for Modern Workplace, which is where productivity and collaboration meet security and compliance. So I support our customers through either their cloud journey or their journey to optimal security posture by providing insights on the licensing that support your initiatives. So today's focus, which is designed to empower organizations with more demanding identity and access management needs, you can leverage Azure AD P2 to automate access request workflows, access assignments, reviews, and also expiration. You can also incorporate sign-in risk as part of a conditional access policy. And this proactive approach will be a theme you'll see throughout today's presentation. So our hope after today's webinar is that you'll have a better understanding of how Microsoft helps customers determine who can access their corporate data and distinguish different levels of access for users depending on specific factors and even more. If you have any questions around licensing and how you can integrate Azure AD P2 into your technology environment, please leverage someone like myself, your sales specialist. And I'll hand it over to you, Lori.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jada and Shay, for that introduction. If you joined us last webinar, you will remember that we discussed Azure AD P1 and its related features such as SSO, MFA, and conditional access. This week for Azure AD P2, we will be focusing on the additional capabilities that come with that license upgrade. To reiterate from last webinar, Azure Active Directory is a universal identity platform that helps you manage and secure all of your users and access to all of your apps. Microsoft is one of the largest identity providers, and it's a true global identity service that operates at hyperscale. Over 200,000 organizations trust Azure AD, and we manage over 500 million monthly active users with an average of 30 billion daily authentication requests. So I really want to focus on this slide and lay the foundation. Service reliability and availability is one of the top considerations for our customers in choosing an identity and access management solution. With Azure AD being the largest enterprise cloud identity service, reliability and security of our service is a top priority. It starts with operational excellence in the cloud, physical security, operational security, global cloud fabric that runs our clouds, and our security services. The first side is the secure foundation of our cloud services. This is about how we operate our own cloud services, Azure, Office 365, and so forth. We have some of the world's best physical security to provide secured building environments, and within those buildings, secure server environments. Providing maximum availability, we design and distribute our physical data centers to be highly redundant so that there are no single points of failure. We look for multiple levels of isolation, ways to elastically scale, and fine-grained physically separate domains to minimize risk while also offering decorrelated backup authentication services. To enter a server environment, for example, a person would have to pass through multiple layers and provide multiple forms of identification. They would also be scanned for things such as metal in their pockets to make sure that they're not bringing in devices to steal information. So there's a great deal of physical security in place that we do on behalf of all of our customers in our cloud services. An example of our operational excellence is around restricted access. When Microsoft employees need elevated access so that they can do maintenance on a service or when they need to investigate a customer support issue, they only have access to exactly the resources they need and only for exactly the amount of time that they need it. So they have just in time and just enough access to do their work. And then they get out. They don't need any standard elevated access that allows them to view customer data. And this is something, again, where we can make an investment at Microsoft that gets heavily leveraged because all of our customers benefit. And lastly, network and distributed denial of service protection is in place for all of these services. We do basic protection to ensure our services work reliably, and Azure customers can take advantage of additional protection at the network layer to suit their needs. We can see here that this is the Azure AD Premium Plan 1 license feature set that we discussed last webinar. But today, when you upgrade to Azure AD P2, identity protection and governance is added to that set. Risk-based conditional access and identity protection, which builds on top of conditional access capabilities in Plan 1. Privileged identity management, or PIM, which allows for just-in-time access. And access reviews and entitlement management gives you the power to put process in place to audit user access to groups and applications. Today, we are starting with identity protection and the risk-based conditional access. Identity protection is a tool that allows organizations to accomplish 3 key tasks. One would be to automate the detection and remediation of identity-based risks. 2, to investigate risks using data in the portal. And 3, export risk detection data to third-party utilities for further analysis. And it does so by providing the ability to utilize risk-based conditional access to automatically protect against suspicious logins and compromised credentials. It also detects and remediates configuration vulnerabilities to improve your security posture and gain those insights from a consolidated view of machine learning-based threat detection. So how does Microsoft provide the ability to find and remediate? Pretty simple answer to this is data. Microsoft analyzes 24 trillion signals per day to identify potential threats. These signals come from learnings Microsoft has acquired from our position in organizations with Azure Active Directory, the consumer space with Microsoft accounts, so think things like Outlook.com, and in my personal favorite, with gaming with Xbox. The signals generated by these services are fed to identity protection, and these signals can then be used by tools such as conditional access, which uses them to make these access decisions. Signals are also fed to security information and event management SIM tools, such as Microsoft Sentinel, for further investigation. So now let's talk about risk. Identity protection categorizes risk into 3 tiers, low, medium, and high. It can also calculate the sign-in risk and user identity risk. A sign-in risk represents the probability that a given authentication request isn't authorized by the identity owner. Sign-in risk can be calculated in real time or calculated offline using our internal and external threat intelligence sources. Some examples of sign-in risk are anonymous IP addresses, like from a Tor browser, atypical travel, malware-linked IP addresses, unfamiliar sign-ins, and more. Now, a user risk represents the probability that a given identity or account is compromised. These risks are calculated offline using Microsoft's internal and external threat intelligence sources. Some examples are leaked credentials, which is typically done by posting publicly on the dark web, paste sites, or by trading and selling the credentials on the black market. Microsoft has a service that checks these against Azure AD users' current valid credentials to find valid matches. We discussed conditional access on our last webinar, so I'm just going to touch on the overview here. But if you have had a conversation with the Modern Work specialist at Microsoft over Azure AD, this slide may look familiar. Conditional access is an intelligent policy that allows you to define conditions for how users authenticate and gain access to apps and data. So on the left, there are various ways we can access our data via Azure AD, ADFS, various devices, locations, and browsers. The process then takes the policies that have been set, includes machine learning and real-time evaluation to process the controls that have been set. These controls can be things like allow or block access, require MFA, password resets, and more. Then, based off of the controls that have been granted, allowing or blocking your access to M365, SaaS apps, or on-premise applications. When Shay went over the conditional access last webinar, she touched on the user and sign-in risk options that are available in Azure AD P2. When the license is upgraded to an Azure AD P2, these options become available to you in the Azure AD portal. So now let's look at a quick demo here. There are two places you can configure the user and sign-in risk. Here in the Azure AD portal, or aad.portal.azure.com, you would navigate to the security blade and into the identity protection blade, where you can turn on user and sign-in risk. But if you wanted to get a bit more granular, you would instead navigate to the security blade and then the conditional access. This is where I will show you an example of configuration. So here, I will navigate to the security blade, then to conditional access. And I want to pause here real quick. Here you can see I have two policies set up, one for user risk and one for sign-in risk. I have them separate because if you remember, sign-in risk can be calculated for real time. For example, right when a user is signing in. So I want to require things like multi-factor authentication. While user risk is offline and checks for things such as leaked credentials. So for that, I want to use something like password reset. So let's look at user risk first. Here, we're going to give it just a basic name, pick the users that this is tied to, so all users, and just for demo purposes, I'm going to exclude myself as the admin. Then I'm going to select what cloud apps this applies to, and any conditions that we want to set. So here, user risk, I want to turn this on to configure, and then configure the user risk levels needed, so high and medium. Then for access controls, I want to be able to grant access, but before I grant access, I want the user to require a password change. Now we'll go back to the policy sets and we'll look at sign-in risk. And it's a pretty similar process. Sign-in name, users or workload identities, excluding myself again as an admin for demo purposes. And then the cloud apps are going to be all cloud apps for demo. The conditions that I have set in this case are sign-in risk. So I want to configure the sign-in risk, and then the sign-in risk level policies will be high and medium. And in this case, for the access controls, I do want to grant access, but I also want to require multi-factor authentication. Now let's look at what that might look like for an end user. So here I have a Tor browser, and we understand that this would create a login IP that might bounce around to different places or look for anonymous, or basically look anonymous or look like a login outside of the norm for the user. So in this Tor browser, I'm going to navigate to portal.office.com to log into my 365 services. And again, because it's a Tor browser, that IP address or that signal is bouncing around everywhere, so we don't really know where it's coming from. I'm going to enter my email address. I'm going to enter my password. And and we can see that the MFA kicks in. And for demo purposes, we're using the SMS version of multi-factor authentication, but you can also utilize the Microsoft Authenticator app or a FIDO2 key. So now this is basically logging me into my Microsoft portal. Might take a couple more seconds here. And we can see it's logging in. So now let's navigate back to the Azure AD portal. So in this case, I'm going to navigate back to the security blade. This time to identity protection. And here we can see a reporting overview. Medium risk users, identity score, and the counts. So let's click on risky detections. Here we can see all of the information tied to that detection. The anonymous IP address, users' risky sign-ins, the detection timing, the source. So let's click on this user's risky sign-ins. In this particular case, we're also given that basic info. The request IDs, IP address, browser, the device info that was being utilized. So again, browser, the operating system, and the risk information. So in this case, anonymous IP address, the detection was real time, risk level was medium, and we can see sign-in locations and sign-in clients. And then we can also see what that MFA info was requiring here. So now I'm going to click on these three dots and I want to pause here. We can see that there's users risk detections, sign-in risk detections, but then we can also see that we have two additional options, confirm sign-in compromise and confirm sign-in safe. When we click either confirm sign-in compromise or confirm sign-in safe, this is us also providing an additional data point or signal to the machine learning within Microsoft 365 to start to adjust to the behaviors. If this sign-in was confirmed compromised, obviously the system next time would not allow this to occur, or a higher risk level would be set. If I confirm the sign-in safe, then the system starts understanding that these types of sign-ins are not as risky. So now I'm going to go back to the risk detections. And you can see the numerous filters I have available. Auto refresh, risk state, for example. So if I select all of the risk states and hit apply, I'll see additional information populate here. All of the different detection types, password sprays, anonymous IPs, the risk state, whether it was at risk or remediated, and then the IP addresses. Now, just to read through, give you a couple more examples here. Here's three quick examples that really make it easy. On the left, we have a user who's a sales account rep based out of London, mobile device, last seen 5 hours ago. The device that they're utilizing is healthy, fully managed, also last seen in London. They're trying to access the travel expense app. So since this is low, we allow that access. In the next scenario, the user on the left is a VP in marketing, and the group that they're a part of is a sensitive group, executive members, configured on the corporate proxy, also in London 5 hours ago. The device is fully patched and managed, but in this case, the app that they're trying to access is a confidential sales app. So the application is classified as high business impact. We're going to mark this one as low, but because the confidential sales app is a confidential and high business impact app, we're going to require MFA and then allow access. And then the final. The user is a sales account representative, also based out in London, last seen 5 hours ago. However, the way that this user is logging in this time, we're not really sure. The configuration is an anonymous IP and last seen in Asia, which is an unfamiliar sign-in location for this user, or could be even configured atypical travel. So in this case, conditional access risk is high. We're going to block access and we're going to force a password reset for this user. So let's move on to privilege identity management. Privilege identity management, or PIM, is a service that enables you to manage, control, and monitor access to important resources in your organization. PIM mitigates the risks of excessive, unnecessary, or misuse access permissions. It requires justification to understand why users want permissions and enforces multi-factor authentication to activate any role. So why do we want to use PIM? PIM reduces the chance of a malicious actor getting access by minimizing the number of people who have access to secure information or resources. By enforcing a time limit, aka just in time, it reduces the risk of an authorized user inadvertently affecting sensitive resources. PIM also provides oversight for what users are doing with their administrator privileges. So it's a tale as old as time. Well, maybe only as old as corporate and business history. An admin begins their tenure and is given a base set of access for their hired role. Over time, that admin may get promoted, move to a different role, or be included in special projects. When those situations happen, additional access is usually granted based on their new requirements and builds on top of the previous. Those admins then end up with a superset of privileges that are available at all times. So this makes them huge targets for compromise, and this is what we don't want. Instead, what we want to be able to do is only grant admin privileges when needed only, hence the just in time as shown in this slide. So let's look at what that looks like. So first, what I want to show is where the roles can be assigned and custom roles created. So here we are back in the Azure AD portal. I'm going to navigate to roles and administrators. And here we can see the templates that Azure AD provides us. We can also create a custom role. And in this particular case, I have created my own custom role called Super Limited Role. So let's click on that. Here we can see any active or eligible assignments, the description. You can see that the role permissions here are based around deleting application policies, service principals, or devices. So it's pretty sensitive. And then the role settings are what I have created for this particular role. The maximum duration of activation, an hour, require justification, require MFA, and then require approval to activate, and then select a group of approvers, or maybe just one or two. Then the assignment. Do I want to allow permanent eligible assignment? No. How many days will this expire? 15 days. So in this particular case, also, we want to require multi-factor authentication on active assignment and require justification. We'll also want to send notifications to certain members whenever these changes take place. So now I'm going to navigate to the PIM blade and go to Azure AD roles and into roles. And you can see here, there is same thing. You can see the same roles on the super limited role here. So let's navigate to assignments. And we do have someone assigned under a super limited role here as Adele Vance, but let's click a new one here. The role I want to select is going to be the super limited role that I created. The scope type will be, in this case, directory, but we can choose application or service principal if needed. And I'm going to select a member. I select Adele, maybe Alex. I think maybe in this case, I'm going to remove Adele and just keep Alex. I'm going to click next and in the settings here. And so I'm going to pause really quickly here as well and kind of go over what the two assignment types are, eligible and active. The difference is here. Eligible means when you turn this on, this is only granting the eligible time that the user or the role admin can actually turn on or activate it. It is not active as soon as I assign this out. if I selected active instead, as soon as I assign it, then that role would be active. So in this particular case, I'm going to leave it as eligible. The maximum allowed duration is going to be 15 days. And as you can see, I'm really reiterating that 15 days. Then I want to select when this assignment starts and when the assignment ends. So let's go ahead and assign this out. I'm assigning to Alex Wilbur. And so now Alex is now assigned an eligible assignment for the super secret admin role. We could also see any active assignments that are currently ongoing, insights admin, directory readers, global administrators, and any assignments that have expired. So now let's look to see what it looks like from the person who has been assigned and how they can activate. So now I'm logged into the Azure AD portal, and I am logged in as Adele. I'm going to navigate to the PIM blade, and I'm going to take a look at my roles. Eligible assignments, any active assignments that I currently have, and anything that has expired. I'm going to go back into eligible assignments, and here you can see I have the ability to activate the super limited role. You can also see this validating request, and this is where I also want to pause. The additional verification required, if you remember, while I showed the role that the super limited role had, I was requiring MFA anytime they needed to activate. So Adele is going to click this to continue, and it's going to open an MFA prompt. And again, in this particular case, we're utilizing SMS for MFA. So now that the request is activated, or the MFA has been done, we can go into different roles to see, we can see what that scope looks like, and then we can activate it here. We can do a custom activation start time if I wanted to start at a later time, and the duration is set to a maximum of 1 hour. And so here I'm providing that justification. Need access to process deletions for Mark 8 project. And now this has been activated. Or it's sending a request. Because I have the security policies on here super strict, now the administrator also has to go in and approve. But keep in mind, you don't have to have all of these approvals if you don't feel the need to. I'm just showing this for demo purposes. Now the PIM role approval as an administrator. Navigating back into my login. If I was working out of my inbox, I would navigate to Outlook. I would receive a notification that I need to review. And I would click on approve or deny this request. This is going to open up the Azure portal, where I can see all of my requests to renew or extend or requests for role activations. But let's say I tend to work out of the Azure AD portal. So I'm going to navigate to the PIM blade and navigate to approve requests. And I can see the same screen here as well. So here's that request that Adele just submitted. I'm going to select. And here I have the ability to approve, deny, or refresh this activation request. So let's approve it here. Providing my business justification. And now Adele is approved. So that was cool. We got to see how to create the roles, assign them, request approvals, and approve or deny. But what about audit? So navigating again into the Azure AD portal, into the privilege identity management, and into Azure AD roles. And towards the bottom, you'll see some activity, and I'm going to pause here as well. The resource audit gives you a view of all activity associated with your Azure AD roles. The My Audit, however, enables you to view your personal role activity. So let's take a look. The resource audit is going to populate, again, all of the activity associated with the Azure AD roles. You can see all the actions that are taken, the scope, what the role, which is the primary target is, who the requester was. And under the My Audit, we get some similar information, but this is based off my own personal role activity. Entitlement management. So when we move into the cloud, our identities become the new edge of our networks, and we need to protect our identities and all that go along with them. Identity governance allows you to balance need for security and maintain productivity. So we need to ensure that the right people have the right access to the right resources at the right times. And when they don't need them, we take the access away. This increases security by reducing the risk footprint. So we also need to review all accesses and processes to make sure that they're still valid. Entitlement management is an identity governance feature that enables organizations to manage identity and the access lifecycle at scale by automating access request workflows, access assignments, reviews, and expiration. So employees need access to various groups, applications, and sites to perform their job. And so managing this access is extremely challenging, especially as requirements change. New applications are added or users need additional access rights. And so the scenario gets more and more complicated when you collaborate with outside organizations. You may not know who in the other organization needs access to your org's resources, and they won't know what applications, groups, or sites your org is using. Azure AD Entitlement Management can help you more efficiently manage access to groups, applications, and SharePoint Online sites for internal users and also for users outside your organization who need access to those resources. So let's use an example. And it's one that I'm sure most of us have experienced at one point or another during our careers. You start a new job, you get your badge, your laptop, mobile devices, then you usually sit down with a mentor or onboarding buddy. But how often do we start new roles where we don't know what specific applications, groups, or what sites we need access to at the start? In my personal past experience, I have gone through weeks not having everything I needed to get up and running immediately. It was usually me coming to a complete stop when I was trying to complete a task, and I realized I didn't have access. Then I would have to reach out to my manager, where at times we had to sit and figure out the correct place to request access and then wait for that to be granted. In a better world, your manager would simply submit a workflow to give you access to all the apps and groups that you need to be a member of to do your job and hit the ground running. This is what entitlement management helps with by using what we call access packages. These are predefined packages that contain resources such as groups, applications, and SharePoint sites. You can then define policies based on who can request, for how long, and include approval workflows. Finally, users' access is always time-bound and is reviewed via Azure AD Access Reviews. So let's look at how we can create an access package. Navigating to the Azure AD portal once again. In this particular case, I am going to navigate to my identity governance that I have favorited, but I can also access it via Azure AD directly. And I'm going to go to Access Packages. I have two already created, but let's go ahead and create a new one. I'm going to give it a name, SM Onboarding, SM for Sales and Marketing. Description, New Hire for Sales and Marketing. And the catalog in this case, we'll select General, and I'll go over what catalogs are in just a moment. Now we have resource roles. So we have groups and teams, applications, and SharePoint sites. For the groups and teams within the general catalog, we have sales and marketing. So we're going to select that. In the applications under the general catalog, we have Box and Salesforce. So we're going to select those. And under SharePoint sites, we have sales and marketing. So we can see the different subtypes, security groups, applications, SharePoint sites, and then I'm going to select the roles that I want these members of these access package to have. So member for the security group, user for Box, standard user for Salesforce, and for sales and marketing, I want them to just be a member. Next, I'm going to go into the request. So for users who can request access, users in directory, users not in directory, or none. In this case, we're going to use users in our directory, and we're going to select all members excluding guests. I want to require approval and require requester justification, and I can have 2 stages of approval, but in this particular case, we're just going to click 1 and add the approver here. And in this case, it's just going to be me as the administrator. I want the decision to be made within 4 days. I want to require approval justification. And if I don't take action, maybe I'm too busy, I want to select a backup or an alternate approver. So in this case, I'm going to select Alan as my backup. And I want this to be forwarded to Alan after 3 days. I'm going to enable the new requests and move on to the requester information. So the requester information is where we can add questions for the requester. These can be in different question formats and also use different language with localization. So you can see there's the place to enter the actual question. The answer format, short text, multiple choice, and the localization, where the localized text and then the language can be selected. But in this case, we'll just move on to the lifecycle. Now we want to set expiration of access package. I don't want this one to ever expire, but I do want to require the access reviews. So in this case, the access review, it looks like 3/20/22. But maybe I want to select this for maybe next quarter, right? So let's start looking at the end of June. Maybe June 30th. But I think I've changed my mind. And it's April Fool's Day, so April 1st. And the review frequency will be quarterly, the duration in days 25. And selecting here, self-review. If reviewers don't respond, I still want to revoke that access. And I want to show reviewer decision helpers. So I'll show you what this is later as well. And I want to require justification. Now the rules piece here, custom extensions, right? Users can integrate logic apps with entitlement management to broaden their governance workflows beyond the core entitlement management use cases. So basically, you can set up automated workflows. We can look at the certain stages that we can enable those at. So when it's created, approved, granted, and then we can also create those custom extensions as well. But for demo purposes, we are not going to do that today. For review and create, we're going to look at all of the policies that we have set within this access package, how we want that to be handled, and we're going to click create. Here's my access package created successfully. We can see the overview, the resources that are tied to this access package, the policies that I've set, the initial one with all of the settings that we just configured, and the separation of duties. And the separation of duties settings on an access package is where you can configure that a user who is a member of a group or who already has an assignment to one access package cannot request an additional access package. We also have assignments, so nobody just yet. Any requests, nobody just yet as well, since we just created this. And any access reviews. So we do have an access review, but it's not started yet. So if we go back to overview, we can see this My Access portal link. Now, if I was a new hire and my manager was telling me all of the things that I needed access to, they would just provide me with this link where I could access that access portal to be able to request the access to that package. So let's see what that looks like. Here I am now logged in, new hire of the day. I'm plugging in the link that my manager has given me. And it takes me directly to that access package. I'm going to enter my business justification. And submit. So now that's being processed. And remember, based off of the policies that we set, we have some super strict things in place. So we also want to approve that access request. So I've set myself up as the approver here, as the mod administrator. So I'm back in my Azure AD. And if I work out of my inbox here, I'm going to navigate to Outlook. And hey, something just popped in, action required. Approve or deny the request. So let's look at what that looks like. This is going to navigate me to myaccess.microsoft.com. And here I can see any pending approvals. So here's Alex's. And I could look at these details. When it's due, any of the details of the request itself, any of the package details, which are the resources that are applied to this access package, and any approval history. So this is new. There's not really much to look at there. So I'm going to provide my justification. Sweet. So now that I have just approved that for Alex, I'm going to go and navigate back to the Azure AD portal into that access package. And now under assignments, you can see that Alex is assigned with the initial policy and it's currently delivering. Now, remember when I created the access package, I touched on catalogs when I was creating that. And I think you got the gist as it was highly implied, but let me go into a little detail. A catalog is a container of resources and access packages. You create a catalog when you want to group related resources and access packages. So in this particular case, I'm back in my Azure AD portal. I'm going to navigate to the catalogs blade. And I have two here. I can create a new one if I want, but let's look at general. Here are the resources that were tied to the general catalog that we had to select earlier. Any of the access packages that might be applied to this catalog as well. Any roles or administrators that you are assigning as an owner, and any custom extensions. Let's look at IT catalog. IT catalog resources have all of the resources that maybe a member of IT need access to. All of the groups, SharePoint sites, and applications. Maybe we want to add more to this catalog. So we can go into adding the resources. We can add additional groups and teams. We can add additional applications. And of course, we can add additional SharePoint sites. No access packages exist currently, but let's take a look now at access reviews. So with the entitlement management that I just went over, access reviews was mentioned because I wanted the access package to not expire, but I still wanted the access to be reviewed occasionally. And I think if I remember correctly, I selected quarterly. So it was an option to select when creating that access package. So what's an access review? An access review enables organizations to efficiently manage group memberships, access to enterprise apps, and role assignments. Users' access can be reviewed on a regular basis to make sure only the right people have continued access. It assists in ensuring that the right people have the correct access and ensuring that we are removing people who no longer need that access. Azure AD Access Reviews is a policy-based access certification mechanism, which can be used not just for your employees, but also for your guest users and privileged roles. With the growing trend of more apps and services moving to the cloud, it can also be used for non-human workload identities or service principals. To gain more insight on access reviews or for audit and compliance needs, there is the possibility to download an access review history report. These reports can be constructed to include specific access reviews for a specific time frame and can be filtered to include different review types and review results. So let's create an access review. Back in my Azure AD portal, I'm going to navigate over to Groups. And I'm going to navigate over to General. And I want to make sure that this self-service group management is turned on, where owners can manage group membership requests in the Access panel. Now I'm going to navigate to Identity Governance and navigate to Settings. And here I want to make sure that group owners can create and manage their access reviews for the groups that they own. So under access reviews now, you can see I have 2 that are currently active, but let's create a new one. I want to today review applications, but I can review teams and groups. The application I want to review today is going to be Salesforce. And I want all users in this case. Here, multi-stage review, meaning if I wanted more than one approval flow here. So on the second and third stages, they can approve or deny as well. But in this particular case, we just need one reviewer. I can select either users or groups. The users can review their own access or a manager. But in this particular case, we're going to select Alex to be the reviewer. The recurrence of the review will be the duration in 6 days, and I want it to reoccur just one time. I don't need it to occur more than that in this case. I want to auto-apply the results to the resource. So if it's denied, the access to the resource will be removed. And if the reviewers don't respond, in this case, I still want to remove access. At the end of the review, I want to send a notification to, in this case, myself as the administrator. And I want to enable reviewer decision helpers, and I'll show you what this is in that particular portal. The advanced settings, justification required, email notifications, and reminders. So let's review and create here. We're going to give it a name. Salesforce Access Review. AW for Alex Wilbur. And create. So now let's approve an access review. We've assigned this out to Alex, and I am now logged in as Alex, and I'm in his inbox. So now he has a notification or an email where an action is required. Please review access to Salesforce app in Contoso. So let's start that review. In this case, you can see all of the users that are tied to that Salesforce application since we selected all users. And then we also have recommendations. And in this case, the recommendation is to deny since the last sign-in date is unknown. And I can look at the details. I can approve or deny, and I can see that this last sign-in is more than 30 days ago. I can also select I don't know. I can also do a bulk approve, deny, or don't know. Accept recommendations, but I'm going to approve it. And I'm going to enter my justification. And you can see the decisions approved and the review by Alex Wilbur. I can also see the history here, and if I needed to change my decision as Alex, I could do so as well. Occasionally, leadership may want to get a report of the access reviews to gain more insight or for audited compliance needs. The portal allows you to download the audit reports, and they can be constructed to include specific access reviews for a specific time frame and can be filtered to include different review types and review audit. So you can see that there is an overview here, and there is the option to process those reviews. We can see the overview of the access reviews here. The different access reviews that have been created. So let's click on this. And as an admin, I can see the results of that. I can stop it, reset it, delete it, look at the essentials and the progress that's been made, 100% in this case. Then I can look at the results as well. All approved, who it was reviewed by, and the recommended action. I can also view the audit details. So for example, in this particular instance, Lynn Robbins, these are the access reviews that she has gone through. Back to the detail. We can also see reviewers, remind or add reviewers here, and any settings that we have set previously. And then we can also go into any of the audit logs for this particular access review. We can download or refresh this as well. But what I want to do is go into the identity governance blade once again and go into review history. And here in review history, you have the ability to create a new report just in case you have leadership that needs something to perform an audit, or maybe it's due to compliance. So that concludes the end of the presentation and demo portion for today. But here are the different ways you can purchase Azure AD P2. You can purchase it as standalone. It comes in the EMS E5 bundle. It comes with the M365 E5 security bundle, and it also comes within the M365 E5 security suite. If interested, here are some customer case studies. Shay will be posting the links to access in the chat, so you can read up on them. And now I'm handing it back to Shay.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lori, for that awesome presentation and demo of Azure Active Directory P2. At this time, I would like to point out that there are some upcoming webinars we have scheduled, which Lori is showing on the screen right now. The next one being Defender for Office 365. This Defender for Office 365, in that webinar, we'll be talking about all you need to know about email protection, features such as safe attachments, safe links, automatic investigation and remediation of email threats across board. So please, if you've not registered, go ahead and please register, share with friends, share with colleagues, and we'll be looking forward to having you in a few weeks. I will be placing the registration link in the chat so that if you'd like to register for that, you can go ahead and do that. Since we have a few minutes left, please feel free to ask any questions, any additional questions in the chat. I will be happy to take them one by one. I'll pause and see if there are any additional questions. All right. All right, so I'm putting the webinar link in the chat right now. Please go ahead and register. If you also have feedback for us after this webinar, if there's some things you'd like us to do better, some things you'd like to learn about, please feel free to add that feedback in the link that I've just posted in the chat. We are coming up to the end of the hour, and that will be concluding this session. The recording will be made available to you for future reference. And again, if you have any additional questions or require more information, please reach out to your dedicated sales specialist, your account exec, solution specialist, or whatnot, or your partner. Thank you so much for being a part of the webinar today. We really appreciate you, and do have yourself a very lovely day. Thank you.